Children, you are winding up your study of democratic politics. Can you name important concepts of democracy that you learned last year?
Sir, we have learnt all these last year. Democracy is a form of government, where people elect their representatives. We have learnt making of the Constitution of India. Then, we learnt structure and functions of the legislature, the executive and the judiciary. We also have learnt fundamental rights and scope of improvement.
Excellent. Can you recall the concepts you have learnt this year so far?
Sir, we have learnt these things this year. Power sharing is the foundation of democracy. India is a federal democracy. We also learnt how federalism is practiced in India. Democracy accommodates social diversity. Political parties are necessary conditions in democracy despite the challenges they face.
Very good. Even today, there are other forms of governments like communism, dictatorship, monarchy, etc. Despite the drawbacks of democracy, people prefer it to other forms of government. What could be the reason?
We can live as equal citizens.
We can live with dignity.
It can help resolve social disputes, as it happened in Belgium.
You mean, people prefer democracy for these reasons, don't you? Let me show these points clearly. Democracy promotes equality among citizens. As you mentioned, everybody can expect to live as equal citizens. It enhances dignity of the individuals. Everybody wants to live with some amount of freedom and respect. People believe that democracy can help them to live so. Democracy improves the quality of decision making. You know that when many heads are put together, the chance of taking harsh decision is ruled out. So, people believe that democracy enables taking good quality decisions. It also provides a method to resolve conflict. As you mentioned, democracy can indeed develop mechanism to resolve social conflicts, as in the case of Belgium. Democracy allows us to correct our mistakes. For example, if we have made a mistake of electing a bad person or a wrong party to power, we can always correct our mistake by voting them out in the next election.
But sir, do these things really happen in democracy?
That's a good question. Most people support democracy because of the reasons we just studied. At the same time, they are not satisfied with democracy in practice.
Democracy, then, appears to be good in principle, but felt not so good in practice. Am I right, sir?
Should we support democracy only for moral reasons? Should we not consider prudential reasons? That is, should we support democracy only for the promises it makes, or should we consider what happens in practice too?
Sir, we need to consider both.
Well said. We need to consider both the prudential and moral reasons. But, before we start assessing democracy, we need to scrutinize two things.
What are they, sir?
First, all countries that claim themselves to be democracies because they have a formal constitution, parties are there, elections are held and some rights are given to people. Obviously, these are the elements we wish to see in democracy. Can mere presence of these make a country democratic? We need to ponder about. Think about all the examples that we took last year. Consider Zimbabwe, Pakistan under General Pervez Musharraf, Mexico ruled by PRI. In all these countries, there are constitutions, elections are held and certain rights are given to people. But we learned that democracy shouldn't function as they did in those countries. Thus, what democracy can achieve varies from country to country. It mostly depends on how people practice democracy. It also depends on nature of the society, population size, etc. Second, our interest and fascination for democracy may push us to believe that democracy can solve all socio-economic and political problems. If that doesn't happen, we start blaming democracy. Democracy is just a form of government like any other, but it can create conditions for people to fulfill the objectives. It is for the citizens to make use of those conditions to fulfill their expectations of democracy. We can still have certain expectations of democracy. We will learn them one by one. Those are called the outcomes of democracy. It is nothing but democracy's achievement against our expectations. Let's discuss the outcomes of democracy. There is one political outcome. That is, democracy produces an accountable, responsive and legitimate government. There are two economic outcomes. They are: democracy achieves economic growth and development and reduces economic inequality and poverty. Finally, there are two social outcomes. They are: democracy accommodates social diversity and it ensures dignity and freedom of citizens. Let's assess democracy on all these counts. Democracy can produce an accountable government only when it meets the following three requirements. A. Free, fair and regular elections. B. Public debate. C. Sharing of information and transparency in administration. Let's analyze each of these. Let's see why free, fair and regular elections are necessary in democracy to produce an accountable government. A government is formed because of the votes of the citizens. The citizens transfer their power to the leaders by way of elections. So, these elections should be free, fair and regular. Public debate should also take place to produce an accountable government. The government should not take decisions as per its whims and fancies. Whenever possible and feasible, people should be consulted. Public should be involved in the decision-making process. Public debate should take place. Public opinion should be honored. It is appropriate to compare the decision-making process of democracy with other forms of government at this juncture. One of the allegations against democracy is that it is very slow in taking decisions. It is slow because it must follow norms and procedures. The time invested is worth as the decision is likely to affect the citizens positively. In non-democratic forms of governments, rulers do not bother about public opinion, neither do they follow any norms and procedures. So, decision taken by them may not affect the people positively. A citizen has the rights and means to know how decisions are taken. This is transparency. This element is absent in non-democratic countries. The government should share information with the public. The administration should be transparent. Citizens-elected government should not work behind the Iron Curtains. Let's assess these. First, free, fair and regular elections. You have studied electoral politics last year. You have also observed how elections are fought in our country. Has democracy been successful in ensuring free, fair and regular elections? What's your opinion?
Elections are held regularly, but only the big parties and rich candidates win elections. How can it be fair?
True. Elections are not level playing ground for all. The rich people and big parties enjoy undue advantage over poor people and small parties. But elections have been largely free of corruption. It is not that everyone votes only if they are given currency notes or other bribes. The large section of the society votes, hoping that the next government would do something good for them.
So, democracy's performance is mixed in holding free, fair and regular elections.
Now, let's assess democracy's ability to produce such governments that share information with the public and provide transparency in administration. Most democracies refuse to share information with the public. Even the administration is not transparent. Democracy has failed in this regard in many countries. This cartoon tells us about the present scenario. Let's move on to assess democracy's performance in producing responsive government. Responsive government is one that exhibits sensitivity to citizens' needs and aspirations. Democracy can produce a responsive government only when it honors majority opinion and works for people's welfare.
But sir, most democracies have neglected majority opinion, and routine tales of corruption frustrates us.
Exactly. Only defense for democracy is that there is no proof to show that non-democratic governments are less corrupt and more responsive. Well, it's not a good defense. Democracy's performance has not been very satisfactory in producing responsive governments. Let's go to the last part of the political outcome. Democracy's ability to produce legitimate government. A legitimate government is one which is legally and morally accepted by the majority. Look at this table. India and its neighbors are compared. Very large percentage of people prefer democracy to other forms of government all times, don't they? Of course there are people who support dictatorship at times, but they form a small percentage of the population. There are also people who don't care about the form of government. Such people are more in Pakistan than in other countries. But, in general, there is a overwhelming support for democracy in South Asia, as in most part of the world. Thus, democracy is legitimate. Let's look at the spread of democracy over the last 1.5 centuries. It will only strengthen our conviction that democracy is indeed legitimate. Just watch how democracy became popular over time.
Democracy may be slow, less efficient, not always very responsive or clean. There is overwhelming support for democracy. Democracy's ability to generate its own support is an outcome itself which cannot be overlooked.
Democratic government is legitimate. It is people's choice. Children, that's the end of the first part of the lesson. In the second part, which also is the last part, we will learn economic outcomes and social outcomes of democracy.
Thank you,
sir. We look forward to that class.